NFL MVP awards. Mark Irwin, a former bare-knuckle boxing world champion, he openly took heroic doses of psilocybin mushrooms on his fight days. And most recently, Dante Liberato, he ran 500 miles under the influence of psilocybin and LSD, and he's currently being documented for film. So some questions I had before I started this research that I aimed to answer was, first, what is the impact of psychedelic use on physical performance? What types of psychedelics are used for performance and at what doses? And are there specific physical activities that more frequently report psychedelic use for performance? So first, you're probably wondering why physical performance? Well, there's a research gap. Empirical research on psychedelics as performance enhancers is sparse. This study is the first to examine the general population's accounts. There's strong anecdotes. Athletes across sports and skill levels are increasingly reporting performance-related effects. Physical performance can be measured with concrete quantifiable metrics such as speed, strength, endurance. And flow state has been extensively studied and validated in athletic populations, making physical performance a natural starting point for examining the psychedelic and flow state overlap, which we're going to get into later. This also leads to more applications, such as understanding how psychedelics affect physical performance establishes a foundation for studying both cognitive and creative enhancement next. So I used Reddit to organize and collect these anecdotes. Reddit is an online discussion forum where millions of users who are typically anonymous come together to discuss niche topics, and these topics have their dedicated subreddits, which are communities of people on Reddit. So I utilized the qualitative content analysis of the Reddit posts. I used the search term, only one search term, sports psychedelics via Reddit's general search, and I got 253 threads returned by relevancy. Accounts I included, was only accounts of psychedelic use during physical activity, and I excluded speculative posts that were off topic, or posts that had no personal experience. For example, someone saying, I watched WWE wrestling while on LSD. So I started with 253 threads, and I screened them, and 39 threads met the inclusion criteria, and then these 39 threads had a respective total of 1,687 comments, which I screened down to 290 relevant comments for a total of 39 thread posts, plus the 290 comments for 329 total posts in this data set. And I found some interesting results. 24 out of the 39 threads had predominantly positive discussions around psychedelics in an athletic context, whereas 15 had substantial positive and substantial amount of negative accounts of psychedelics in a sport context, and 0 threads, this was interesting, 0 threads were predominantly negative. And this could explain why. So most threads came from a psychedelic or drug-related subreddit, and 14 came from sport-specific subreddits dedicated to like different sports like soccer, football, etc. Most threads actually came from 2022. The first thread in the data set was from 2013, and then we saw a sharp decline after 2022, and it's kind of maintained since. So some themes emerged from this data set. Here's the categories that emerge. Most notably, physical performance enhancement, and then second, flow state, automaticity, perceptual and cognitive enhancement, risks, limitations, and safety concerns, reduced fatigue, microdosing as strategy, psychological and emotional benefits, and fairness and ethics and governance discussion. So there are many, many sports mentioned in these data sets. The top 3, notice how they're individual sports. Martial arts, running, cycling, they're not team-based sports. So you don't have to communicate with other people, because communication may be hindered while under the influence. But there was a significant amount of team sports, like number 4 and 5, basketball, football, but the top 3 definitely have a lead. So the two most common substances reported in these threads were psilocybin and LSD, which are the Coke and Pepsi of psychedelics, so it makes sense. Psilocybin was mentioned more in the context of microdosing than LSD, but they're both roughly the same in macrodosing, and both encompasses threads that have mentions of microdosing and macrodosing. So psilocybin had a slight lead. It was mentioned in 32 threads, whereas LSD was mentioned in only 25 threads. There was less frequent psychedelics, such as DMT, 2CB, and other research chemicals in these threads, but they weren't significant enough in the accounts. And so here's a survey of past year use on psychedelic substances by adults in the United States. So 11 million people were surveyed. 11 million people were found to have taken psilocybin, and this was about 4 times the amount of people who took LSD in the past year. This survey was conducted in September 2025. Although psilocybin was 4 times used by 4 times as many people, in my data set, it was definitely not used by 4 times as many people. So LSD is actually overrepresented in this data set. And so we're going to dig deeper into the themes that emerged, starting with psychedelics as performance enhancers. So users report measurable or perceived improvement in physical output, improved strength, speed, etc. One user states, "I used to microdose shrooms before hockey and my scoring dramatically improved." Keep in mind, these are not the actual quotes, so you can't look up these quotes and trace them back. I've altered them slightly, and they're just paraphrased. Flow state was the second most common category. Users describe entering effortless, absorbed performance where conscious deliberation disappears. A college soccer goalie on 2 grams of psilocybin describes anticipating plays before they happen, feeling fluid, and reaching new level of flow state. And so on the left here, we have the 9 dimensions of flow, first theorized by Mihaly, probably pronouncing his name wrong. And then on the right here, you can see how it maps to different aspects of the psychedelic state. But the bottom, which are mixed and weak correlations, don't really pay too much attention to that because these are just like theorized. Like we can't necessarily say that flow state maps directly to a psychedelic experience other than loss of self-consciousness, transformation of time, action awareness merging, and autotelic experience, which is an intrinsically rewarding experience. I created this, by the way, but the top 4 directly map to the psychedelic parallels. Okay, so digging more into flow state, psychedelic states share cognitive and neurobiological overlaps with flow, as you saw on the previous slide. The default mode network deactivation is observed in both psychedelic states and flow states. Athletes report flow can be consciously triggered. This was found in research on athletes in general, not athletes using psychedelics. But perhaps psychedelics may remove that barrier, so taking the psychedelic itself acts as a conscious trigger of enabling flow state. So another theme that emerged was reduced fatigue. Users often report being able to push past their normal limits. One user said he's a pro fighter, he's been doing this for years, and he would never use it during competition, but during training, he feels like the conditioning aspect of the workout no longer applies. The part of my brain that tells me I'm getting tired completely shuts off. Psychedelics have anti-inflammatory and anti-nociceptive properties, and studies show pain reduction in chronic headaches and cancer-related pain. Another theme is perceptual and cognitive enhancement. Users report heightened sensory or perceptual experience, such as sixth sense, spatial awareness changes, sharper focus. One user states, "I felt more connected with my body and technique seemed simpler. I knew when and where punches were coming from earlier than usual." There's also a lot of risks. Users report negative outcomes, injury, worsened performance. I did jujitsu and LSD. It was unpleasant. I got tired and my body was overheating more than usual. And then lastly, fairness and ethics and governance. There's only 2 threads, but these threads were very rich in data with over 50 comments So users raised questions about psychedelics as performance-enhancing substance in competitive context. One user replied to a thread that was asking if psychedelics should be considered cheating. I microdose shrooms regularly. Using psychedelics feels like cheating. The mental and physical edge they give you is unmatched. I avoid them on my harder runs so that I still have to push through on my own. However, as you can see at the bottom, is psilocybin prohibited in sport? No, psilocybin is not currently prohibited as a performance-enhancing drug, states the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. But because of the effects on attention and perception, use of any hallucinogen in sport poses serious safety risks. So why does this all matter? And how can we connect this to aspects other than athletics and sports? So this study focused on physical performance because it's measurable, but the mechanisms at play, flow state, ego dissolution, default mode network deactivation, apply far beyond athletics. So if psychedelics can reliably trigger flow states, the implications extend to creativity and artistic performance, cognitive work and problem solving, music and performance arts, and maybe even workplace productivity and focus. Psychedelics are already being explored as smart drugs, and business managers were reported to be increasingly using LSD. Is this for performance? Is this for creativity? We don't know. So there's some implications with this line of research. First, athletes' health. If psychedelics do end up getting banned, athletes won't be able to take psychedelics to treat their mental health because they'll show up in their drug screenings. Also, athletes may try psychedelics thinking it will help them, and they could possibly end up getting hurt. Also, overexertion. Research may take a turn into using psychedelics for productivity, which we're kind of seeing in the Silicon Valley realm. Increasing dangerous trends of overworking and pushing limits due to less feelings of pain. So there's also some limitations with this study. All coding was conducted by a single researcher, me. Self-selection bias. Reddit users who post about psychedelics and sports are more likely to have had noteworthy experiences, both positive and negative. So unremarkable experiences are underrepresented. And Reddit's user base skews younger and male, so this limits the generalizability of these findings. And participants were self-reporting, so they don't actually know if they used that substance they said, the dosage, and there's no way to confirm the purity. So here's some future research directions we can take. Definitely a deeper cross-examination of psychedelic states in the flow state, more controlled studies, putting athletes in standardized controlled conditions to test speed, endurance, etc. And here's an interesting one. So there's many anecdotes of ibogaine working as a stimulant and microdoses. We're only looking at ibogaine in macrodoses for like treatment of, let's say, opioid use disorder. But until 1970, ibogaine was sold in France under the name Lamborghini, marketed as a mental and physical stimulant. Also, we need to see at which doses people are enabling performance enhancement effects. So controlled dose response studies could clarify which dose range affects performance and in what direction. So overall, psychedelics appear to enhance physical performance, but through mechanisms unlike traditional performance-enhancing drugs, according to these accounts only. Rather than building muscle or increasing oxygen capacity, like PEDs, they alter consciousness in ways that remove psychological barriers that limit performance. So for this reason, perhaps they are better understood not as performance-enhancing drugs, but as potential-enhancing drugs. If these mechanisms extend beyond athletics, psychedelics may serve as potential-enhancing tools that can be applied to other domains of skilled human activity. Here's my references. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to collaborate on future research related to flow state or psychedelics for performance, that's my email. If you're not an email person, there's also a QR code. You can reach me on like LinkedIn or other social media. And I will take any questions you guys have. Yes?
I think that was great. What an interesting topic. And so I really enjoyed that. I was curious about the gender component because I was thinking, in terms of athletics and in terms of Reddit users, as you pointed out. I'm curious on your take on that. Do you think that, what do you think about this idea of there being a gender split between people using psychedelics
Yeah, so Reddit users are mostly male. There's no way of really knowing their gender. A lot of Reddit users tend to stay anonymous. It's used for anonymous discussions. I'm sure there's plenty of women who play sports, but we don't know for sure how many of them make up this data set. So in future research, like putting surveys out and actually collecting that data would be great. So if anyone wants to collaborate on that, that'd be nice. Yes?
I didn't find any mention in the threads of, this is coming from somebody who's like kind of peripherally involved in like the mixed martial arts community.
Mhm.
A lot of people love to smoke so much weed before doing jiu-jitsu. Did you find any mention of that in the threads as well? This
So,
probably like,
yeah, I box, so I understand that. Yeah, there was a few accounts. I did remove cannabis because it's like a mild psychedelic, so I didn't put it up here, but I do have like the numbers for that. But it was only a few mentions. Alrighty, yeah.
This is kind of not a profound question, but I was just really curious about the DMT. If there were any anecdotes about because
Yeah, one, I don't know if it was up there, but one guy said that it removed his performance anxiety. I don't know if he did it ahead of time, like right before a fight, like it's called a businessman's trip. So you can do DMT in 5 minutes and then go back to work. Like on your lunch break, you could do it. So I don't know if he did it right before. It wasn't specific, but he said it removed his performance anxiety before he competed.
okay,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And then Aaron Rodgers, he did ayahuasca, but he's not doing it while actively playing. But he did credit the ayahuasca, because he did it the same year he won the MVP awards back to back. He said it made him a better team player, so, yeah. Yes?
In your sports breakdown, I saw you had 5 mentions of weightlifting. Was there any discussion about the mind-muscle connection?
There was.
And how that impacts each other?
Yeah, it was only theorized. People were like, yeah, I think I felt more mind-muscle or mind-body connection. There was accounts of that, yeah. Thank you all so much.